Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of Rendezvous with Anza Saqib on CxO Global TV. CxO Global Forum is a knowledge sharing platform for all C levels across the globe who are not only domain experts and thought leaders, but have made contributions that are highly significant in the fields that they're working in. We take massive pride in contributing to this knowledge economy. Like every time, we've got a very special guest with us today. He has tons and tons of contributions to the knowledge economy, and he's worked in a multitude of domains. Without further ado, let me introduce our guest today, Mr. Faisal Sherjan, who is not only a VC but also a serial entrepreneur. And he has many other introductions, but let's hear more from him. Thank you, Mr. Faisal, for joining us today.
Thank you, Anza. I'm an angel investor, right? I walk in when the VCs have scared the poor little founders. I say, now I'm an angel. I'll hold your hand. I'll help you get to the point that this VC can then come and skin you alive. So I do that, in NUMS. So we had a VC there, Khurram Zafar, who was my predecessor there. Khurram would do this session with a cohort of founders, and by the time you finish with them, they had glazed eyes. They were thinking, "I'll never ever get there." And then I used to come in and say, "Now you listen to an angel, right?
Right.
Here is the path you
Absolutely.
will walk, and here is the point at which the VC will come and give you a hug." So I'm an angel investor, and I'm happy
Right.
doing that.
So we'll hear more about your professional journey, but first, I'm sure a lot of people are curious. How did your personal journey begin? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What courses you studied? And what led you to becoming this really sought after giant
Yeah.
in the corporate space?
I I lived in Lahore. I was born in Lahore. I grew up in Lahore. I went to school in Lahore. I went to HSN, which was an interesting experience, not just in the classroom but outside the classroom, because it was a preparatory school. You had sports and you had sports fields and all that. I mean, I have the distinction of carrying the towel for Imran Khan when he was playing cricket, which meant I was the junior most member of the team. So you get to carry the towel and you get to take them a drink of water, right, when they take a little break. So that's where my journey started. And I mean, my son asked me this question a few years ago because he wanted to make his own case. So he asked me, so he said, "What did you want to do when you were 16?" So I said, "I wanted to be a nuclear physicist." He said, "Really?
Wow.
So you wanted to be a nuclear physicist?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You didn't get there, did you?" I said, "No, I didn't." So he said, "What did you do next?" So I said, I wanted to go to MIT. My father didn't agree, right? He wouldn't support that desire. So I rebelled and I went and joined the army. So he said, "You joined the
Lovely.
army?" I said, "Yes, I joined the army." He said, "And you trained to kill people?" I said, "Well, kind of, yes." He said, "Did you kill anybody?" I said, "No." He said, "What a waste of time." Right? So, journeys are very interesting. And I realized that you can carry a compass and you can find true north, but you need to craft your own path. That's what I did, right? So I joined the army. Maybe I should have, but I was a top achiever in the army also. I was doing very well. And then one day I had the epiphany and I decided I can do better outside, right?
Mhm.
So I decided and I quit. I resigned my commission. I didn't wait around. I resigned my commission. I moved to Karachi thinking that I need a degree, right? Because I had a bachelor's degree from the PMA Kakul, which kind of, it qualified me for certain things. But I thought, it's best I go and pick up an MBA degree from IBA. So I went to
Mhm.
Karachi. I got a job in Dawn newspaper. Right? That is the interesting part of it. Just 2 months out of the army, I landed in a newspaper. And the funny thing is, they hired me on the sales side, but I started writing. And I started writing articles. I remember special report was produced within the 4 weeks that I was there, and I wrote most of it. Special reports were these tabloid-sized magazines on special occasions. But anyhow, that is, and I decided to go to the IPA, so I went and I applied, and surprisingly, surprise to me, I qualified. I was interviewed by one of the most tough deans that the school has ever had, Dr. Wahab. And I started the PGD program, the postgraduate diploma program, which then leads you to an MBA. So the first semester, I could barely go to class because I was so busy working. I left Dawn in a month and I joined an advertising agency. I was in a hurry, right? I wanted to telescope time because I'd spent so much time in the army. I thought, no, those 5 years, I need to telescope them in a short period of time. So I left Dawn after a month, which Hamid Harun didn't like. And he chased me all over the place to tell me I shouldn't have done that. But anyhow, I stuck to it. So I joined an advertising agency. At that time, Sasa was in the top 5 agencies, and I got an offer. I actually got offers from multiple agencies. 2 or 3 agencies made me an offer. So I decided to join Sasa because I knew a couple of people there. So I joined Sasa, and from there on, my journey in advertising started. And the consequence of that was that I couldn't go often to the class at IBA. And at the end of the semester, I took the exam and I passed. And I said, I'm wasting my time. I don't need this piece of paper. So I just dropped out of there and I concentrated fully on building my career in advertising. Within a year and a half, I'd gone from a trainee to becoming a creative director in an agency which was pretty large at that time. That was the remnant of JWT. It's called Paragon, and I joined them 6 months after Sasa. I joined them as a creative director. So I was on a fast track. Then I was picked up by Exxon Chemicals, which is now Engro, because I was handling their account, and their advertising and sales promotion officer had left for Canada. So they wanted me to join, and I thought, why should I join this company? But when I asked around, everybody said, oh, it's the biggest corporation in the world. You won't get an opportunity like this. So I decided to join that. I did. 8 months later, I decided I'm not going to do this because this is too slow a track for me. And the trigger was, there was an Eid card that had to be designed. And 3 senior managers sat for 2 days trying to decide whether the card should be horizontal or vertical. I didn't see myself doing it for the next 20 years. So I resigned the day after, and I went back to advertising. Right? The agency I had left, they wanted me back in any case because they needed somebody to help them build brand journeys. So I went back. 7-8 months later, I was made an offer by Tahir Khan, who was the founder of Interflow, right, to become a partner. So I decided that. I measured that, and he's an interesting person. Right? So I joined. And the 2 of us then, in fact, and 3 of us, in fact, Seema also, Tahir's wife. So we built one of the fastest growing agencies in Pakistan. When I joined in 1985, our GMV for that year, our total spend was around 17 million, right, from a plethora of clients. And then we stepped on the gas. I think the 3 of us just came together at the right time. And within 3 years, we had gone to about 430 million. We had actually swept the market with picking up multiple MNCs. We picked up some of the biggest local brands, Pepsi and Polka and Gul Ahmed and Nestle and Bata. I mean, these are big names. And then Lever. Unilever was the big win. So all these brands. But I realized, I loved the creative process. I loved writing. I loved visualizing. I loved creating concepts. And then an opportunity came along for television, right? So Shalimar Recording decided that they were given a license to set up a network of TV stations, which were all city stations. Interesting concept. So we bid for it, we won. And I decided that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to do advertising. I want to do television. So NTN's first few offices, Islamabad, then Lahore, then Karachi, right? I was instrumental in getting them up and running. And all this took me, it took about a year, little over a year, for us to, get these 3 stations up and running and all that. At the same time, I went abroad. I went to London for a vacation with my family and met some interesting people there. One of them had been struggling to set up a South Asian TV station in the UK. And he was not the only one. There were a number of them, right, who were trying to do that. This Wasim Mahmood was the gentleman, right, who went on to do a lot of other things. He was knighted by the Queen also. He was given an OBE, in fact, not knighted, but he was given an OBE for the work he did in media. So I sat with Wasim, we discussed, and I decided that that's what I want to do. So I came back, I told Tahir, I'm going to do this. And I would tell him every day. So finally he said, okay, all right, just go and try it and, get it behind you. He thought it won't happen because we didn't have capital. We had very little money. So I had something like, about $20,000 at that time that we had got as dividends from doing a very big project, which is the SAF Games. And I decided to invest that. I went to London. I was staying at a friend's place, and I decided to launch a satellite TV station. I mean, it was ridiculous, but it was a dream worth pursuing. And it actually happened, right? So we started. I was able to raise some more money from friends, and we started with a cable system there. It was called Coventry Cable. So we started on that. It was about 100 kilometers away from us. So every night we used to deliver tapes to Coventry Cable's office. Right? Drop them through the night box, and they would then, start transmitting it every morning. First productions were done in my apartment on, using the dining table, right, with 3 machines only and a camera, which is all rented.
Wow.
We didn't own anything. So we started like that and we built it. And TV Asia still stands today as the UK, right? So
Wow.
it was a very interesting journey, right? We were able to then go find a warehouse in Northolt where the studio was built, offices, studio, everything was in one unit, very small, but I had a very good team. I had a very young team and a very good team. Most of
Sounds
them.
like a very interesting journey, Mr. Faisal Sherjan. But now I'd like to know a little more about what it is to be a serial entrepreneur.
You have to be nomadic. You have to be a nomad, right? You need to have your tent packed at every time. All the time you have to have your tent packed, ready to move, and then you find north and you head out. So I was doing that. My inclination was to be very nomadic. I was not tied to anything. I could easily pivot. I could easily go do something very different. I was never afraid to try something. That is the key thing. I mean, if you ask anybody and say, how do you launch a TV station, a satellite TV station,
And
with
that's
twenty
really not a
thousand dollars? At that time, Anza, the satellite transponder
Mhm.
cost you 4.2 million pounds. 4.2
Wow.
million pounds for the year, right? And I had $20,000 only. So starting from there, so we had to, start on cable, build on cable. But you get when you set your mind to it and you start doing things, the universe also conspires to make it happen. So while
Paulo
I was
Coelho.
doing all this, yeah, while I was doing all this, I ran into some really interesting people. None more so than the CEO of Sky, which is B Sky B, which
Oh,
is one of the
lovely.
largest.
Yeah.
Yeah, his name was Sam Chisholm. And I remember
Mhm.
I had gone to see his CFO. I had no business being there. Right? I hardly had anything, but I had a story to tell. So I went and told the story to the CFO. He was very interesting, Walter Wolke. And while I was talking to him, Sam Chisholm walked in. And he said, "Who's this guy?" And he said, "Well, he's from a place called Pakistan, somewhere in South Asia." And he is talking about launching a satellite TV channel for South Asians. So Sam Chisholm was this very short guy, right, but very energetic, right? And people used to say he's a New Zealander masquerading as an Australian. So he would be
Ah,
very curt, very frank, very brutal. So he said, "So what's your story?" So I said, "Here's the story. We have 3.5 million South Asians in this country. They have large shopping trolleys. They spend a lot of money. They want a connection back home. They're underserved. BBC does a few programs, but that doesn't work." He said, "That doesn't excite me. Tell me something more." I said, "They're fanatically crazy about cricket. They're
mhm.
absolutely. This is 1992, and I'm having this
Absolutely.
conversation
The
with him
World Cup.
around the end of Jan, right? So he said, "Okay, I'll check into this. But if we do it for you, what do you want?" I said, "I want satellite capacity. I want to
Mhm.
be able to broadcast." He said, "Okay, if we do it for you, what do I get in return?" So I said, "What do you
Mhm.
want?" He said, "How much are you going to charge?" I said, £15 a month. He said, "You're crazy. We don't charge that much." And I said, "Well, you may not, but my customers will pay because they're totally
Yeah.
underserved." He said, "All right, if it's £15, I'll take £2 for Sky. We will do the transmission for you, right? We will manage your subscribers also in this price. I said, done, deal. So we have this conversation, and then, as luck would have it, Pakistan landed in the finals of the World Cup. Right, that is 26th March. I still remember,
Mm-hmm.
and England and Pakistan were playing. So the Prime Minister of England, John Majors, who was himself a cricket enthusiast, he asked Sam Chisholm to allow BBC to broadcast the match. And Sam Chisholm said no. He said, no, I'm not going to allow that. We have the rights, we will do it. So what happened was that Pakistanis suddenly rushed out to buy satellite dishes by the thousands.
Wow.
And their center in Livingston, Scotland, it completely lit up with calls coming in. So the
Wow.
next day, I got a call. At that time, we didn't have mobile phones and all. So I got a call from Sam Chisholm. I'd given him my number, and he said, "Come in and see me again." I went in, and he said, "Your story was absolutely perfect, 100% accurate. How can we now help you?" I said, "Well, I need satellite capacity to start, and at that time it was very difficult to get it because these are all analog transponders. In one transponder you could only have one channel. Now you can put
Mm-hmm.
in 22 channels in one transponder, right, by
Mm-hmm.
through digital technology." So he said,
Absolutely.
okay. He called his guy, and he said, get on to Luxembourg. They were the satellite operators, and find capacity for Faisal, right? So we started. I even sent him a crate of mangoes, which
I hope
made
they didn't extend.
yeah. So
Yeah.
mango diplomacy worked. He loved the mangoes, and he managed to get us some satellite capacity. On that journey in March, just around that same time, I met one of the younger Bachchan brothers, right? So Ajitabh Bachchan. His wife used to come and do a morning show with us, right? She used to do
Mm-hmm.
an interview program called Face to Face. Ramula Bachchan. She was very
Mm-hmm.
keen on getting involved. So she obviously spoke to her husband. He came and met me, and he said, how can we do this? So their lawyer was a very interesting gentleman, a Parsi guy. And he was very much into this brotherhood and humanity and all that. So he drafted a contract between us, which said, the shareholding would always be 50-50. So India would have 50%, Pakistan would have 50%. Nothing would change, no matter
Brilliant.
how much money was put in. The
Mm-hmm.
Bachchans actually did put in about $1.8 million, right?
Wow.
Eventually, within a year and a half. Because that is the kind of money needed for the satellite transponder payments and all that. So it was very interesting. So I did that from around 1992 to 1994. Very short period of time, but very intense, right? And we got
And
to a
what made you
stage
come
that we
back to
had funding of
Pakistan?
about $13 million eventually,
Mm-hmm.
right? We got other investors in. So by that time, our dilution was to a very small amount, right? It said India and Pakistan. It didn't say anywhere else, anybody else. So that anybody else brought us down, and eventually we decided that we're not going to be able. I was still the CEO, but I could see things are changing, so we exited from there. So we went in with $20,000. We came out with $256,000. So it was a good
Wow.
exit, right? In that way, and I came back to Pakistan to run NTM again. Right, I didn't get to run it for a while. Tyre and I had some problems, right? So all that became an issue, and then 1997, 1996 actually, December 1996, I took over the running of NTM again, right, and continued that till 1999. The government was out to, kind of oust us from there. There was all kinds of things. That is one of the problems that you have in Pakistan. When you become successful, issues crop up. So at the same time, I was very ill. I had surgery for cancer, and I had
Mm-hmm.
follow-up chemo. So I was doing all
Mm-hmm.
that. I was battling the government. We were battling inside the shareholders, and my health was also a factor. So we continued to kind of fight for about 2 years, and then I had to have another surgery, which was for my heart. I was 42 and I had a triple bypass. So a lot of things happened. So I left. I went to the US first, and I was just trying to find my feet, after the surgery. I went to the US for a while. I, kind of traveled around, went to a couple of conferences. which were technology conferences and new media. So my area, in fact, I had already started in NTM. We created one of the first websites in 1998 where we were putting our programming and all that. Right? So we were trying to be ahead of the curve. I even started another company because I exited Interflow and I got paid for my shares. So I used that to start one of the first ISPs. It was called Pi Communications, and we ran that till I left the country because I wasn't well and all. Right, so all that it was again, it was forward looking. So at that time, there was this need dial up. You had to have a dial up connection. It was all cumbersome, but we found a way around it with a quick start pack. I was using my TV Asia experience to put these quick start packs at the Shell stations. You could go and pick up a CD, and all you had to do was go and load it, and it would auto load, and you were up and running.
Wow.
If you had a scratch card and you were up and running. So we did things like that. At times, you're ahead of the curve, you're ahead of the time. When I look back now, we were ahead of time, right? So that creates its own challenges. I went back from the US. I went to the UK. I landed there with $1 in my pocket. I was down to nothing, right? And I got lucky again. Right? While I was flying from the US, it is an overnight flight, and somewhere mid-Atlantic, a telephone number popped up in my head. So when I landed in London, it was a Sunday morning. My cousin came to pick me up, and that's all I knew, that I have a cousin where I can go stay. And that number, it was kind of bothering me. So after having breakfast, I called the number. This is somebody who had worked with me in TV Asia. Her name was Nina Kent, right? And she's from India, Punjab, and her husband. So I called, and Nina picked up the phone, and she said, she used to call me FS. She said, FS, where the hell are you? We've been looking for you. I said, looking for me? She said, yeah, I'm working with this company, and they need somebody to run it. And I've been telling them, you're the only person who can do it. So why don't you come and have lunch? I'll make dal chawal for you. So I said, okay, I'll come over. So I went, had lunch. She had asked one of the shareholders of that company, somebody who was from one of those big firms, and he had started this company called Silicon Valley Internet Services, but they didn't have somebody to really run it. So we had a discussion. Next day, I got a job offer. So I started again. And I run that company. We raised about 1.6 million pounds, right, to take it to the next level. We did a lot of work. And while I was doing all this, I was obviously noticed by different players. So one of them, Hutchison, that was going to be the first pure 3G player in the UK. And this is 2000, coming on to mid 2000. They invited me over. I went and met them, and I was offered a job as a team leader for communities, because marketing was divided into communities. So I joined again. It was all about content. Like I said, my interest was in content, and it was delivery of content now on mobile phones, which is what really kind of infected me deeply, because you're carrying a gadget in your pocket, and it's a point of inspiration. Also, you have a camera in it, you can shoot something. You're a publisher and a broadcaster. You can consume content at leisure. You can consume content on the move. You don't have any limitations, right? You're not limited to time and space, right? So even though YouTube came about 6 years later, right? YouTube was 6 years later, 2007. And while I was there with Hutchison, we were doing a lot of work on content. I was part of the strategic marketing team also. And then, I was kind of again approached by Veer Shakil of Jump Group, and he wanted to come back to Pakistan. So I said, look, I don't see any reason why I should come back, right? What is it that you have in mind? And he said, oh, we're launching a TV station. I said, that doesn't excite me anymore. I've done that. It's over. He was very surprised. He said, really? He said, so what excites you? So I had this iPad in my pocket, right, which is like a digital person.
The iPad.
Right? Yeah, the iPad. So I took it out, and I said, this is the future, not your television screen. And for the next 45 minutes, he was kind of asking me questions, because he has a voracious appetite for information. So I spoke to him, and he said, no, you pack your bags tomorrow and you come. I said, no, it's going to take me a couple of months, right, to disengage, and I will do that. So I did. September I think it was what 2002. Yeah, 1 year after I was at Hutchison when 9/11 happened, and I still remember that day. And I
Mm-hmm.
do remember after that there were little indications that people were not very comfortable in my presence, even though I was taking parathas for them, and I was treating them in the office
To
with stuff
manhost.
because I was fortunate to take a person to London who would cook for me and take care of things. So he used to make great stuff. But anyhow, I came back, and I came back on the express understanding that I would help the young group launch a DTH platform. Right, that was the
Mm-hmm.
first thing. So when I came back, you know, they asked me to first kind of distribute Geo abroad, internationally. So we did that. It took me about 8 months to get them into the US, to get them into the UK, to get them into Oceania. It didn't take too much, and I didn't. I only traveled once. Right? I did most of it from my laptop. So that was quite interesting for them, and saying, "Well, how do you do this from a laptop?" And I said, "This is what we should do." Right? It was a kind of an early indication of how future of work would be. So we did
Mm-hmm.
that. I hired a team, and I handed it over to them. So one young guy I hired, he now heads the international. Right. In fact, I handed it over to him in a year's time. Right. So I never went to Denver for US. I sent him because I wanted him to. I wanted my succession. My whole thing was to do DTH. Right. So we did that. We kind of egged the government on in 2003. They put out an RFP. We responded. We won. But then, it didn't happen. It didn't happen for two reasons. One was the issue with Pembra. They did not formulate the rules. So the big question of whether the DTH platform from Pakistan would carry Indian content or not carry was kind of the biggest barrier. My argument was it doesn't matter, right? Eventually, local content takes precedence, right? And the
Right.
two kind of esperantes of satellite television are sports and movies, right?
Right.
So, in that context, we should look at it. Sony Corporation is an international corporation. It's not an Indian company, right? If
Right.
Sony Corporation gives movies, whether they're Indian movies or they're American movies, they're movies, right? So that was my argument. But I think there was a problem within the group also. The appetite was not there. We had done the modeling. It was around project worth $130 million, right? Then Star got involved. We got in discussion with Star. They wanted to come to Pakistan. So the project went up to about $300 million, but
Wow.
eventually it didn't happen. Still hasn't
Mm-hmm.
happened. It still hasn't happened. Pakistan has suffered as a consequence that it didn't happen. Right? I'm now on the board of Pembra, and I argue that every day there, right? Whenever we have a meeting. So I'm pushing for that because I think the window is closing, right? With the growth of mobile telephony, right? You have 110 million smartphones now, and every smartphone is a broadband connection. And then within another 2 years, 3 years, you will have 5G, which means huge change in the bandwidth and in terms of speed of download. So you might not even need DTH anymore, right? You might
Absolutely. And
just
it might become obsolete. But let's talk
yeah.
about being an angel investor, and especially in a country like Pakistan. What all does it entail? And since I'm sure you've had a lot of ideas are a dime a dozen, it's the execution that matters. Where do Pakistani startup pitches go wrong?
The first thing, I became an angel investor because in 2012, I had a discussion with the chairman of Jung, and he said, we need to go beyond the newspapers and all that. And I said, yeah. So I said, okay, let me see, what greenfield opportunities we have. So I started looking into multiple areas, dairy and food production, and all those things you can deliver to a home every day, right? Because we had access to the home. So I was looking at that. Then I went to Plan 9 to take some workshops, and I think it was cohort 3 at Plan 9 at that time. I went and took a couple of workshops, and I got introduced to startups in Pakistan. I selected 3 of them, right, as investment opportunities, and I took them back to the group. And we didn't even have to put in money. All we had to do was help them build the brand, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing in any case. We had all the touch points. We had television, we had radio, we had newspapers. we had magazines, but I saw they didn't have the appetite to do it. So that's when I decided to quit. I quit my job with the young group. We had sold a bit of property, me and my two sisters, and I decided to invest in these three companies that I had seen. Right, so Traveling, Xgear, and BookMe. Right, these are the three companies.
Book me,
Now,
right?
BookMe, yeah,
Yeah,
BookMe is
the famous.
basically
Yes.
yeah tickets and all that. So I worked with him. I worked with that founder. We did a lot of work, right? And I was of the view that more than cinema, is bus ticketing that would be the big thing, because cinema is very complicated, and I knew it that cinema is much more complicated than bus ticketing. So all that happened. Traveling, uh, it was rickshaws, right? Ride hailing, and then Xgear was smart car and smart retail or smart distribution. Now, from there, my journey started, and people heard of me and they started to come to me. So I eventually ended up with 7 investments. Now, 4 of them have gone bad. And normally, what happens is either you lack product market fit. Even though Xgear was, I think, the best of the three, the problem
Mm-hmm.
with Xgear was the market acceptance, because uh, there is the slight gap between what Nestle wants and what Nestle gets in terms of its distribution, because it doesn't own the vehicles. Somebody else
Right.
owns the vehicle, right? So we were trying to use data to make distribution more efficient. But if you're not getting data, you can't do anything. So we had those kind of experiences. I invested in companies that I understood the domains. So content is one domain I really understood. So Patari was one of them. I'm the co-founder of Patari. In fact, I am the founder of
Wow.
Patari. The whole idea came from me. I knew the music industry, and I knew what could happen. And I knew that consumption of music on mobile phones was going to be the biggest area, because I had seen it in Hutchison also. One of the
Yes.
first products that was being developed there was music. It's easy. You don't require too much bandwidth, right? And you can do a lot of things. So Atari was designed as an audio platform. I was insistent that we will only do Pakistani music, simply for the reason that you need to have some differentiation. If I start to do a mix of everything, even though I knew Sony Corporation, I had a lot of Bertelsmann. I knew, right? These are big music companies. EMI International, I
EMI.
knew. I worked, yeah, because of my period in Hutchison, I got to know all of them. But I was insistent that we do only Pakistani music to create that point of differentiation. And I said, okay, if we need tonnage, we add other audio. So we added audible literature, right? Mirza Ghalib, a lot of people may not be able to read, but Mirza Ghalib read out to you, right, has a lot of value. So we did
Yeah.
that. So we've got audible literature also, and we started doing podcasts also. So we created a package that way. So Patari has gone through a lot of turmoil. Right? It was one of the most loved brands at one time, and then problems happened,
Absolutely.
and
And then the decline happened.
yeah. So all that happened. It has made a comeback, and this whole thing. Oh, Spotify is here now, so what's going to happen? Well, Spotify has been here for 7 months. What has happened? Have you seen a single billboard? Have you seen anything of Spotify saying anything? All Spotify did was toggle one switch, and suddenly they're in 100 countries. That's all they did, nothing else. Right? So let's be, and I believe in localization. I believe in the power of the local, because your knowledge of the local market, your understanding of the local market, your connection with the local market, right? It cannot be beaten by an international player, unless the
I'm sure
international
you've
player
heard.
comes from.
I'm sure you've had a lot of these ideas and pitches as well. Like, what were the qualities that made you choose these particular ventures that you went into? First, from what I make of your conversation, it was knowledge of the domain that you were investing in. But what I want to know is what was, and I'm sure a lot of startups are going to be replaying this video as well. So, what
So
was one thing that was like a
the first
selling point?
Yeah. The first thing, people talk about ideas, right? They say, oh, nice. I don't talk about ideas. I don't advocate ideas. I talk about the problem and saying, is there a problem that you can solve? And how big is the problem? How many people does it affect? How painful is it? Is it a real problem, that people want a solution to? Don't think of your idea, because your idea is dime a dozen. For the same problem, I could have 20 different views on it. Education being one, right? You could take education as one single problem, right? We know number of kids out of school, quality of education, all these things. But how many different solutions can be designed? That is the key. The
And speaking
understanding
of
the problem.
education, And speaking of education, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there, but it's very interesting that you mentioned education because we had the closing for the Pakistan EdTech Summit 2021 yesterday on CxO Global TV. And you presented a fabulous case study. I think it's one of your latest ventures called Senpai. I, for one, was thoroughly impressed. Would you like to elaborate a little more about what Senpai is?
Yeah. So, I was at LUMS. I was running the Center of Entrepreneurship. I have two grandchildren, right? So, I have constant discussions with my daughter on education, right? So, there's this fear, if my child doesn't get into grammar or doesn't get into baby or doesn't get into HSN, doesn't get into CyCAS or Lucas or whatever, right? It's the end of the world. And I said, no, it isn't. Look at me. You know, all I have, and I say this, all I have is an O level. That's it. Everything else was just there for the taking. So you need to rethink education. You need to rethink how children want to learn, how students want to learn from a very early age. How do they want to learn? And how do they learn? There's no point in getting them through an exam if they don't remember what it was 2 weeks later. They've just kind of, I'm one of those very radical advocates and saying there should be no textbooks. Textbooks are the worst thing on earth. They are horrible and they're the worst way to study. Why do we need textbooks? Why can't we, impart that knowledge, or not even impart that knowledge? Create the desire to learn. Once I create the desire to learn, look at the amount of information that is out there. Look at the kind of content that's out there. I mean, during the COVID lockdown, March last year, so my daughters were kind of saying, "You're not going to step out of the house." So I had to spend a lot of time at home. So I started watching videos on YouTube,
Mhm.
and I discovered this one guy who was teaching calculus. So I started watching calculus videos because they were so interesting, right? And my refreshment in my mind of calculus started to happen. I mean, I'm talking about somebody who's 60 plus. Children are far more open. Their quotient of discovery is much higher. They want to explore, they want to discover, they want to learn. We kill that. We kill that. A 5-year-old child has a lot of faculty to imagine, to question, to critically look at things, to try and dig into it and find answers. By the time they are 15, 90% of that ability is gone
Mhm.
because we've killed it,
Or the
right? So
indoctrination of thought that modern or so-called
it's just
old
the it's
people.
just the method through which we are
Mhm.
teaching. I call it sage on stage. The sage on
Mhm.
stage may do fine, but the student doesn't, right? Because there is hardly any interactivity, there's hardly any discovery, there's hardly any desire to learn. Very few students, and the ones who do, they're being driven to score more marks, right? I never ever looked at somebody's GPA while hiring them. And I was known in Junk Group to hire the best. Whenever Ibrahim Rahman or Mir Shakil wanted somebody for a particular
Mhm.
position at the senior level, I would do the final confirmation interview. And I never did the interview in the office. I always invited them to a coffee shop. And my favorite was this coffee shop, which is also a cigar lounge. So it was a great atmosphere. I would sit. I had a kind of special table in the corner, and that's where I
Uh-huh.
would interview, and that's where they would open up. Otherwise,
But
just
how
imagine.
many people around us are like you? Because I'm a product of a school like Baby Academy and then the Lyceum and all that jazz, and um, we can't deny the fact that it's all the Agrocorps and the Unilevers and the PNGs, the big MNCs, FMCGs that are promoting this culture whereby, if you belong to a certain institution, you do have a sense of privilege. And all their hiring, if you look at it, 80 to 90% are IBA grads, LUMS grads, or those who have studied from the universities in the UK or US. So a lot of the younger lot now feels
Although I left
like,
advertising,
yeah.
I left advertising for this very reason. I would call
Mhm.
brand managers lobotomized robots. They had no imagination, they had no thought process other than what they had been told. Unilever coordination sitting in London would say, "This is what you're going to do," and that is exactly what they did. One of them, I remember a brand manager who later on became chairman, right, for a commercial that was being done in Singapore. It was a Brazilian commercial that was being done. So every frame was exactly the same. E- Every frame, every element in every frame was the same. Even the soap dish, there was a white soap dish which was like a fan shell. And that brand
Mhm.
manager was insistent that that same soap dish should be used. Now, what happened was that the production company in Singapore was pulling its hair out. They eventually went and had somebody model in plaster of Paris and produce that soap dish. And when you think of it, you say, how effective is this going to be? What is the level of effectiveness? There was a story is far more effective than going to this level of completely thinking completely void of any imagination. None.
Absolutely, and which is why the generation now is, as we see it now, ads or common adverts no longer appeal to them. Their consumer, the decisions of consumer, the buying patterns are now
Yeah,
dictated by, let's say, out of the box ideas like influencer marketing, because people like doing business with people
absolutely.
that they know, like, and trust. And it's that human element that matters. So, coming back to Senpai, I saw that there's some great content and you made science look fun. And the interesting thing is that you're developing content that's in Urdu.
Yeah, because we studied for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, right? We looked at different models of learning and teaching, pedagogical models as they call them, and we laugh,
Right.
whenever we produce a nice video and we get a good response. So we say more pedagogy, right? Because I keep hearing these terms, pedagogical model and this and that, and I see nothing which is different. So we did like I said, almost 2 years. We studied Baiju backwards and forwards. It's a $12 billion company today. So we
Right,
looked at
right.
how to develop content, and we saw, what are the important things. So one of the key things was you need to have peer alignment, right? If you use people who are too old or beyond a certain age group, the students don't relate to them. You're talking about an 8-year-old to a 12-year-old. They will
Right.
relate more to a 25-year-old, like an elder brother who's going to coach them, teach them, and all that, rather than a 40-year-old. Right? Is that, at times it's that simple and that deep. So we studied all that. We studied Harvard business cases. We studied, how different areas, different things had been done. Then we started to actually go out and talk to people, right? We went to a couple of schools, and I knew that schools are never going to be our market, but we wanted a perception. So we spoke to some physics teachers. We showed them some drawings of what we intended to do. Then we started talking to students, right? And we produced the first video. We tested that with students, and from there, we kind of confirmed of what they would want. Language was a critical factor. Now I went to HSN and I studied almost everything in English. Urdu was a second language, right?
Right.
So same with Khaled, same with the others, Dabir and Ali and Banish, who do a lot of the work on the script writing and all that. And we decided that we're going to do it in Urdu. The interesting thing is we developed metric courses, but we have O-level students also, right? So O-level students are actually coming to us also, right? Because they like the way we are doing it. That is, I think, is the most important thing is to listen to the customer. You have to listen to the customer. That's where a lot of startups fall short. They do not listen to the customer. If you ask them, how many customers did you actually speak to before you decided to develop this? You find out they've spoken to 5 or 6 people only, normally in their own home. Your mother
Hmm.
is not likely to say no to you, right? She's going to say, "Beta, zabardast." See? So you need to actually go out to customers. Travelly, I force the founders to actually go out to rickshaw stands, to speak to rickshaw drivers, and we understood who they are, right? What their needs are, what their wants are, what their motivation is, right? So you need to really dig deep into the problem and understand it into its depth before you start to ideate. What normally happens, everybody gets an idea and starts running with it, and then when they hit the market, they find out that that idea is not really going to be effective, it's not really going to work. I mean, one of the companies that we had at NIC, a very interesting guy, and he's come back from Malaysia. He came to see me the other day. And that's the other thing. I keep connection with all these people. He came to see me the other day and he showed me something, and I said, "You pivoted." He said, "Yes, I wasn't getting any love from the schools." Now he has he's a very good technically advanced person, right? He does neural language programming and all that. He had developed a methodology to teach students using aptitude tests of what their aptitude was for any particular subject, right?
Mhm.
Using a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Schools are not interested. So he's now doing it
Right. So here
entirely
comes
different.
my next question. So is senpai going to be something that causes disruption to mainstream education, or is it going to be perceived as an aid to
Lost
modern
your
teaching
voice
and
there.
learning? I said, is senpai going to be, a startup which is going to cause disruption to mainstream
Yeah.
education, or will it be perceived as an aid for blended learning models across the board in all schools?
See, I mean, these terms, blended learning and all that, I take them with a pinch of salt, to be very honest. What do you mean by blended learning? Okay, schools are not going to. If you ask me, I would love it if schools disappeared tomorrow, and all children, right, started to learn at a very early age of how to discover, how to build their knowledge and all that. But at least we can change the method through which we deliver knowledge, right? And it should not be just delivery. It should be inspirational. It should prompt them to self-discover, to self-learn, right? Self-learning is the best way. You ask questions and you learn. You keep on asking questions and you learn more. We don't do that in our schools. Please tell me which school does that. Not even the top end schools. I know grammar and I know Bayview and I know LGS in Lahore and all that. Tell me one of them which does that. There'll be a very rare teacher who will do that. And you remember that teacher for the rest of your life. I remember my teacher, my maths teacher, in class 9, 10, and 11. 40% of the time he taught us math, 60% of the time he taught us about life. He
Right.
taught us about how to overcome challenges. He taught us about how to discover. He taught us about how to improve ourselves. At that time, nobody was talking about growth mindsets. But here was a teacher who was driving us in that direction of growth mindsets, of improving ourselves every day. That kind of learning, uh, there's no substitute to it. So I mean,
Absolutely. Point well
you pay a
taken, Mr. Faisal Sherjan. That, unfortunately, we're running out of time on this one. It
yeah.
has been a wonderful, session with you. There's a lot that I learned, and I'm sure there's a lot that the audience learned, and we would request you to keep contributing to the knowledge economy with all your insights. But upon an ending note, I'd like to ask you, what is the best piece of advice that you've received, and something that you've stuck by?
I think the best piece of advice I received was in class six. So we had a class teacher, right? He used to teach English, but he was also the class teacher. And in Hson, you have to ride, right? You have to be a rider. You have to ride horses. I had had a couple of falls, and I was now afraid to get on a horse, right? So I had written an article. I had written an essay, which the title of that was "Guts is all you need." Right? It was about somebody who fights a shark, right? Who fights a shark with a simple knife and all that. So he sat me down and he said, "You wrote this essay. Guts is all you need, and you're afraid to get on a horse just because you fell down twice, right? When you fall and you get up again, you dust your clothes off and you get back on that horse. That's when you change." right? So I learned that very early, that failure is not something you should be afraid of. You cannot have a discovery mindset if you're afraid to discover. You have to discover. So the first thing you have to do is banish fear. I learned that, I think I was what, class six. I was probably what,
11, 12?
eight, about 9 years. We had got one double promotion, so I was nine.
Yeah.
And for me, that lesson stuck because I had written something, and he said, "Do what you've written. You've written this, not me. You said guts is all you need, and then you're afraid to get on a horse." I got on a horse, and I became a good rider.
Right. Lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. Faisal Sherjan, for your time. And we hope to keep hearing from you in the future.
Thank you, Anza. It's been fun. It's been fun.
Yeah, really. Ladies and
Oh,
gentlemen, if you want to learn more about the kind of work that Mr. Faisal Sherjan is doing, and especially about his latest venture, Senpai, we've shared some links in the description. And please keep us updated with your comments and feedback. We look forward to them. Stay tuned for another episode next time. Thank you.